Dr. Betsy Stoutmorrill. I'm the reading professor here at FSCJ. Today we're going to look at a few things about reading, past, present, and future. So I want you to think for a minute about everything that you think or know about reading. Take a minute. Okay, now hit the delete button. Or you can hit the hide button if you think you might need it later. The purpose of this session is to help you understand a little bit more about reading in a little different way than you may have already, kind of formed an opinion about reading, okay? There's a couple of things I want you to know about reading first when we get started. Reading is a social construct. Does anybody know what a social construct is? Cricket noise, yes sir.
An idea that's formed by just generally based off of what society thinks, I guess.
Give that guy a cookie, okay? Yes, yeah, it's a construct. It's an idea or concept formed by the people, the group that came up with that, right? We have a social construct going on right here. All of you are sitting in nice little rows, right? Snacking on your cookies because you know it's the right appropriate time to snack on your cookies, right? You wouldn't be snacking on the cookies if you felt like it wasn't the right time to do it. Does that make sense? That's a social construct, okay? So let's look at what reading is as a social construct. Okay, this says reading is a cultural invention, right? It's a social construct, about power, control, wealth, and social acceptance. Okay, so I want you to think about that for a minute. What does reading have to do with power? What you think, ma'am?
Well, I've always heard the saying my entire life that reading is power.
Okay.
Because you can't read, you can't do anything else in life.
Okay, and I want you to hold on to the first part of that, right? That reading is power. I agree with that. And I can't say that it's not in the library because they'll jump me and drag me off into a closet. Okay, they'll go, this session is over. Thank you for coming. Okay, but I want you to think about that last thing you said about not being able to do anything if you can't read that. And I'm paraphrasing there. I want you to hold that. That's one of the ideas I want you to hide for a moment or be ready to hit the delete. Okay, hang on to that. Okay, so you had an idea too. What did you think?
It was something kind of similar to hers, but it was kind of how I've noticed in history and things that I've read and witnessed. It's kind of a sense of power in the sense that it's like status. If you're lower in
You hear what she's saying?
or knowledge, reading is a privilege that we don't really realize.
Okay, so now I'm going to have you keep all of those things. Do not hide any of those. Do not hover your finger over the delete button. Hold on to those. Okay, so if reading is power, and we'll probably say yes on that, agree, who has the power?
Those that read more.
Who doesn't have the power?
Those that don't read.
Now, he said those who don't read. Okay, I want you to think back in history. Who were those people who did not read?
Servants and things like that.
People of lower socioeconomic status.
Yes, who else? Come on, be brave.
Slaves.
Slaves, people of color, women, poor, okay? The people, so reading, I will concur that reading is power, but sometimes the powerful controlled who got to learn to read, true? And who had the ability to gain that power for themselves, right? It was actually, if you take back in history, illegal to teach a slave to learn how to read. Because a slave who could read could learn more, could be more powerful, could what? Read something about how to gain one's freedom, right? How to purchase coming out of servitude, whatever. Okay, so power, right? So how is reading about control?
It's in line with power. If you control who reads, then you have power.
Yes, and even if you control what they read. How many, okay, do we have any teachers in the crowd besides me? Okay, fingers in your ears for a moment, Miss Bartone. Okay, sometimes some teachers, not all teachers, but sometimes teachers will say, if you don't read this book, then you're not passing my class. Or some other variation of that. True or untrue?
True.
Control, right? You can read other books, fine, go for it. But if you don't read this one, no pass, no go to jail, right? Okay. So it is about control, right? Not only the power to who can read, controlling who can read, but also the power and the control of what you can read, right? Everybody know what propaganda is? Yes. And some governments control what's available on the internet, what's available in print, banned books. Oh, librarians, when I mentioned banned books, they're standing up and cheering because, you know, they're all against that, which me too. Okay, but here again. So what does it have to do with wealth?
Like you said, back then the poor people didn't have the ability to read, but the richer ones, they had the knowledge to read.
Well, they had the knowledge. Why did they have the knowledge? Did those poor people have the capability and the potential to learn to read? Yes. What did they not have? Access to education, right? They didn't have access to a person who could teach that person to read or who would teach that person to read, right? Okay, so it is about wealth, right? Those who control sometimes control the wealth, right? And whether the wealth is money, right? Or whether the wealth is long time ago, the amount of land you had, or the number of cows you had, or in some societies, the number of wives you had, you have the wealth, right? That person has the wealth. Okay, so now let's take one more step. And here's where I'm going to ask you to, that hide idea, I want you to think that, and here again, learning is power, right? Social acceptance. What does reading have to do with social acceptance?
It was not if you can't read, then you're stupid, you're beneath somebody.
Can you hear what she's saying? She's saying very softly, but do you hear what she said? Do you want her to say it louder?
You're considered stupid beneath somebody ignorant.
Okay. So now we come fast forward, right? All right. And now that thought is, if a person doesn't read by choice or by not having the ability to read, or feels that he or she is not a good reader, as a struggling reader, there are terms that go for that, and somehow or other that lowers your social status. And just as this young person did, tell me your name, please. Abby. And thank you for being brave enough to let me use your comment here too, because I mean no disrespect, because how many in here thought Abby had the same idea that you have? You got to learn to read or you're not going anywhere. See, you're not alone, but you were just brave enough to slip that out there and stick your neck out, okay? So is it really true that if a person can't read, for whatever reason, illiterate, meaning cannot read, illiterate, meaning chooses not to read, does it really mean that they can't get anywhere, that they can't be anything? As a whole. As a whole. Now,
Not
see,
individual, because my grandfather was on the farm and he couldn't read and he ended up owning many businesses.
absolutely. One of my best friends is a non-reader, absolute non-reader. And if you want something done in our community, she is the go-to. She can form a group, she can raise more money to do whatever you need to do, not because she can read, but because she has something else. And that's the little carrot I'm going to hang out there to tell you what that something is. It comes later in the session. So that way you don't get up, go get a cookie and go. All right? So now we understand what social acceptance is. So I want all of you right now to reach for the delete button if you think if a person can't or doesn't read that they can't get anywhere. You need to delete that, okay? Because that's why I almost named this session Reading, Oh What a Shame. Oh, what a shame. Because we shame people, right? We do the reader shame, the alphabet shame. What? You don't read? Or you'll never get a job. Well, guess what? We have plenty of people that have plenty of money and access to wealth and homes and families. My dad, too, never learned to read. Okay. Yeah. Wasn't the reading. Okay, so let's look at the next thing. So now, if we're going to say reading is this social construct and has all this stuff in it, right, that makes us possible, right? We're not saying reading doesn't open up doors for people. Absolutely, right? But what does it really take to read? So now I'm going to give you I'm going to give you to a count of 20. All right? And what I want you to do is kind of think for a minute yourself and talk to each other and see if you can come up with there are 7. Unless you're a reading teacher, you might not know all 7. So that's what makes me special and why they asked me to do the presentation instead of one of you. Okay? Let's see if you can come up with how many of the 7 do you think it takes to read? What do you think? Talk for a minute. I'm going to give you a count of 20. Just like the game show music. Do, 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 do. Go on over there, Miss Darley. You know you want to talk to her. And if you want a copy of the PowerPoint, I'll send it to you if you send me an email. Well, sometimes when you're trying to write it all down, it's hard to listen to all of it, too. So you just send me an email, and I'll send you the PowerPoint. All right, you got 2 more to count that. 1, 2. All right, back to us. Okay, so let's see what we think it takes to learn how to read, right? To be a reader, okay? And we're not going to discuss right now good reader, bad reader, strong reader, weak reader, dyslexic reader, non-reader, A-learner. Doesn't make any difference. Whatever the level is, what does it take to read, right? Okay, so we're going to look at that. I also want you to know about how the brain works, right? Because you know what it takes to read, but then you got to know what makes it possible upstairs between the ears. And then let's do a little reading, okay? Don't worry, it's just a little tiny bit, and there's no quiz at the end. Well, kind of there is. Wait a minute, never mind. Okay, so here's the Super 7. When you're done reading the list, give me a big smile. Okay, so most people read. Now, people read at different spaces and different speeds, so I'm going to go over this slide. It's not because I don't think you can read it, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Everybody knows what decoding is, sound symbol, right? If you don't know the alphabet, and here let's talk English, but if you're talking Spanish, if you're talking Japanese, if you're talking, you know, whatever that language is, sign language, and even Braille, you still got to know the sign symbol, right? Even though the symbol isn't seen with the eye, it's seen with the pads of the fingers, okay? Or sign language, right? You know, it's still a symbol for that letter sound. We've got to know what that letter is, right? And we've also got to know what that letter sound or the variations of that sound, right? Because in the English language, is it one sound, one symbol? Say no, OMD, you know, just shoot me. Okay, so once you know the letter sounds, right, then we got to start learning vocabulary, right? We got to put those letters together and make words that you know what that word is, right? Okay? And you also have to know what that word means, right? The definition of that word. So think when you were a little babe, you know, learning how to read, right? In the little kindergarten and all that kind of stuff. And by the way, I do not teach children to read. Nobody's shorter than me. Okay, there's plenty of wonderful reading teachers that gather a whole little clutch of those little drippy things, and you know, teach them how to read, and more power to them. It's the one that doesn't learn to read that ends up with me, or the one that thinks that he or she isn't a good reader that ends up with me. And when you end up with me, that's a good thing for both of us. Me for my continued employment till retirement, yay, and for you because we become stronger readers together. Okay, so you got to know words, right? Let's stop right there for just a second. Okay, I'm going to do a time check. Oh, good. The thing about vocabulary is those who read more, learn more vocabulary, recognize more. It's called the Matthew effect. For any of those who are familiar with the biblical story of Matthew, the rich get and the poor get. So those who read become richer in vocabulary because they see more words, experience more words, and all that kind of stuff. Those who don't read as much or exposed to as many words, even orally, They just don't go up the trajectory like everybody else, okay? So once you know these two, then you've got to have fluency in prophecy. It's called prosody, okay? Here's the thing is, spelling error. It's prosody. I just typed it wrong. I think there's a D in there. I think that Prosidy. My bad. Correct me. Well, they didn't ask me because I was perfect. They asked me because I was a reading teacher. Okay, fluency rate. Do you remember those reading tests when you were a kid? You have 1 minute to read this. How many words can you read in a minute? Same thing with typing. Prosody is that reading with that. You ever had one of those people that read out loud and they can just read a story and put all the sound in it, you know? Okay, and then they can get all the way down to the bottom of the thing and they read it very well, but they have no idea what they've read? Okay, so they have fluency and they have prosody. Okay, but they still don't have comprehension, don't we? Do you notice there's not comprehension on here? Because you don't get, if you don't have all of these, you don't get to comprehension, right? Comprehension is not a reading skill, it is reading, right? It is reading. Okay, so syntax. Ooh, words as there are in the sentence make a whole lot of difference, don't they?
Oh, yes.
Think of the word read. Is it always the word read?
Red.
Now it's read. You got to know how it is in the sentence to know whether to say read or read. And what's the difference between read or read? Present tense, past tense, right? See, you got to know all of that, right? Okay, and you got to know it how quick? Okay, and then we've got semantics, right? We have to know what that word means in that context, right? In that sentence, right? Plane in math is not the same thing as the plane you're going to catch at Jack's Airport, is it? Nor is it the plane that Jane is, right? Do you see what I mean? Or, okay. All right, so you have to know that words change in context. And if you see it, you have to know how the vocabulary to know that plane, P-L-A-I-N, is different than P-L-A-N-E, but P-L-A-N-E can mean this or can that. Got all that going? Okay, so you got to go in your head. Then you've got to have semantics. So what does your prior knowledge and culture have to do?
How you interpret the words that are in that.
You're absolutely right. If you're from a different culture, or if you just have never done something like this before, you just don't have the background knowledge, right? You just don't have that, so things don't make as much sense to you, you know? Do you know I said the phrase that stick your neck out, you know, and I was glad that you stuck your neck out. In this context, when you stuck your neck out, did it hurt you or is it helping you? Helpful. It'll eventually help. It might seem like it hurt, like, whoa, she doesn't like what I said. But then after a while you go, oh, wait a minute. In the Japanese culture, they have the same kind of phrase, and it says the bird that flies first gets the bullet. That's why some of us don't want to answer first, right? Because sometimes we get, did you do your homework last night?
Yeah.
Have you read that book I had to do? Are you listening to me? You know, right? So sometimes we don't stick our necks out. That's about culture, right? You have to know, in this culture, sometimes that phrase is a good thing, right? Squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? Okay. So this is huge, isn't it? Huge. And here again, the more you read, the more life experience you have, the more power you have over yourself, the more that goes up. Now we look at pragmatics. Oh. Anybody know anything about sarcasm? You only have to have one instance of thinking somebody wants to go out with you, and you ask them to go out, and they say, oh yeah. Now you know pragmatics, right? That sometimes the writer, and in this case the speaker, doesn't really mean what he or she is saying, right? Or it's hidden in there, and you got to get out the shovel and the pick and go, oh, wait a minute, okay? So this is what it takes to read. So every time you read something, just like when you're reading it up here, you're doing all of these things at once. And if you were stymied or snafu'd or caught up by one of these things, it's because somewhere in here you stubbed your toe, right? So is reading an art or a science? A little bit of both, isn't it? But if you don't know the science part, right, you can't get to the art part, right? That's why song lyrics are so amazing, right? That's why poetry is so amazing. They pack so much into one little thing, but if all you've got is this, you can't get to there, can you? Okay? Does that make sense? Does it take your mind or your brain to read? What's the diff? Takes both. What's the difference between your mind and your brain?
The art and the science.
I would say your brain is more mechanical while your mind is more.
Science part, right?
Yep.
Right? And that's why some people do have what's called learning disabilities, right? And it's really truly a difference, right? And neurodiversity, we do not all have to be the dang same thing. Let's give us a break, okay? You know? So some brains work differently. So some brains don't snap to in the same speed that somebody else's do. But that doesn't mean the mind isn't sharp. And some people's brains are perfectly fine, but their minds are out to lunch, right? All you have to do is be in a classroom one time and say, the teacher says, right? And you have no idea what you're shaking your head for because your mind was off somewhere else. Happened to all of us, especially with my husband. Don't tell him that, though. Okay, so this is what it takes. If you are a reader, OMD, give yourself a star. Okay, so let's keep moving. Let me see if I can get this to work. I can't. I'm a lefty-righty. Uh-oh. And so this is hard for me. Which is the front? Oh, we did the Super 7. Oh, now I'm going backwards. Uh-oh, and now the back fell off. I'm in real trouble. Oh, please. Oh, wait a minute. I fixed it myself. And I didn't even have to read the directions. Whereas my son calls them the destructions. Okay, so we did these. Let's go forward. I'm still not going forward, am I? All right, I am going forward. Oh, I like that. I'm a lefty-righty, and so the buttons are on the wrong side, so I'm trying to figure this out. Okay, so now let's talk about your brain, right? Because now we did that first notch. What does it take to read? What do you got to do? But now let's talk about how you can actually, how your brain actually reads. Okay, here's the thing. Were any of you born in this room, or anyone that you know, or anyone in the wider world circle, are they born readers? Do they come out of the womb going, excuse me, I'm going to go to the snack bar and get the menu? No, no. Every single human being who is going to learn to read has to be taught to read, right? Now, some people do kind of teach themselves, you know, but they still have to, there's still teaching learning going on, right? There's still that teaching learning going on. So let me tell you about the part of your brain that makes you able to read. Because if we didn't have this part of our brain, we wouldn't be able to read. Now, let's go back in the ancient culture. All right, everybody? Way back. We're talking sticks and rocks, right? Where are the women? Are they out with the sticks and the rocks doing the hunting? Where are the women? Yeah, they're over in the cave, right? Tending the fire and the babes, right? But for this exercise, you women, if you choose to be out with your stick and your rock, you can go ahead, all right? And you gentlemen, if you choose to be tending the babes in the fire, knock yourself out, it's fine with me. But here's the thing is, you had the hunter-gatherers, right? The women went out and collected leaves and roots and berries, and the men went out, and the big spears and rock, and to go get some meat, right? That's what they did? Okay. Those people had to recognize what was good and what was not good, right? This plant, ooh, good. This plant, ooh, you die, right? This plant, good for medicine. This plant, good for taste, right? Okay? This animal, good to kill. This animal, good to run from, right? Because it puts you on the food chain real quick. There's a part of your brain that recognizes shapes and textures and things like that. That's the part of the primitive brain that was repurposed so that you could recognize symbols and letters. Because what does an A really mean? When you look at a kitty face, you know what a kitty face really means, right? Whether it's an icon or whether there's a little drawing of a cat, you know, cat. But if you just see an A by itself, what does it mean? Right? Does it mean anything? So you have to know that primitive part of the brain is what had to be repurposed to teach all of us. Now, so do you think there were some hunters that were better than other hunters? They saw a little pointy ear And they got their spear and they ran for it and they go, ooh, that's a deer. They parted the bushes and they found out it was a cougar. So where is that person? They're on the food chain, right? So some of us are better than others. So some of us learn to read more easily or appear to read more easily than others, right? And some of those older people that didn't get a chance to become a better hunter because they got eaten, okay, they're out of the gene pool now, right? Okay, but still, that's the part of your brain. Now, is that cool to know? Okay, so some of us are hunters and some of us are not. We just try not to kill ourselves or those around us. Okay, so let me see if I can do this. Yes! Okay, so now you know the part of your brain, all right? So now we got to move your brain forward to the brain develops, right? Because in the very beginning stages, when a baby, any of you have little ones around you, or you know with babies, and you get them to recognize something, you know, and then they recognize mommy or daddy's face, and then they smile, and somebody else comes in the room, and they're like, me. Okay, because they're using that primitive brain, right, to recognize something. Okay, but now let's go down to here. This is called the Magic 36. It's called the Magic 36, and the researchers' names are here. And if you want the PowerPoint, I'd be glad to share it with you. And the research documentation is on the last slide. So if you're just dying to stay up all night or you can't sleep and you want one of these articles to read to put you to sleep, here you go. All right. Judy DeLoach did this research to find out exactly when a child is able to really, really learn how to read, right? The regular kids, just regular. We do have some savants, right, super smarties, and we do have some not quite so super smarties, but we all get there, right? What she found out is that a baby at 36 months, which is how old? About 3 years old, all of a sudden can do what's called dual representation theory. A 3-year-old does this. Oh, I probably should have thought another symbol nowadays. Does this, right? What are they playing like? Like they have a what? Gun, okay? And many families, in spite of not wanting to have weapons in their house, look over and their 3-year-old is running after the cat going, right? Because they've seen that gun. Dual representation. All of a sudden, this hand becomes something else. They cannot do that at 2. They cannot do that at 1. Their brains are not developed enough to be able to do that dual representation. You have to get to that dual representation where you can say this letter means something. This scribbling means something else. They go, oh, right? That's why they run around with a stick and they think it's a sword, right? Right? The little girls or the little guys dress up and they really think they do. They are Superman, right? Dual representation theory, okay? You want to see how it works for you? Okay, raise your hand. Take your other hand and draw a line on your palm. Just a line across your palm. However, okay. So what does that mean? What does it mean?
Fraction.
Oh, you said it means fractions. Show me what you drew. Okay, so she drew a line like that. Think math for a minute. Does that represent a fraction to you? Number on the top, number on the bottom? What about if we put it at an angle? It still represents, if you saw it in context of math, right, because remember reading is context, you'd go, oh, that's a fraction symbol, number on the top, denominator, numerator, blah, 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 right? What if you're a coder?
No, it's a computer program.
Yeah, it's a computer program. And we do a backslash. Well, wait a minute. Do fractions go this way? No, fractions don't go. That's wrong. Right? Then dual representation. We know that this slash means one thing, that slash means another thing. So that's what dual representation is. Now you want to try something else? Okay, do this with me. Go to the middle of your palm and draw a little line down. What does that mean? Anything? Okay, now take your finger away. Leave your line there. Put a dot above it. Oh, now it means something. I got an eye on my hand. I'm watching you. Okay. Do you see what I mean? Now all of a sudden it means something because you can do dual representation because you're over the age of 36 months, more or less. Does that make sense? That's why the little ones stand in front of you, the little tiny ones, and go, and they think you can't see them because they can see you, because they can't see you. They can't do dual representation. They can't think outside the box. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, okay, let's see one more thing. Come on, baby. Oh, dang it. All right. It took human beings, and this is research by Marianne Wolf, who absolutely, if you are a teacher or a faculty person, absolutely amazing book about learning very, very reader friendly for students and everybody. Okay, it took human beings about 3,000 years to create written language. To create a written language that enough people knew that we could read each other's stuff. And whether that was drawing, I think of the old cave drawings. Were they words? No, pictures, right? So everybody could read it, dual representation. Here's a little stick figure and a smaller stick figure and 3 little stick figures. What does that mean? Family. Oh, we got it, dual representation. But then we moved to words where it said, you know, John is the father, and Becky is the wife, and here's Susie, Beth, and Johnny Joe, right? And then we had to have it in words, right? It took us 3 as humans, regardless of whether it's English or Spanish or Japanese or whatever the language was, to get from no written language to some kind of written language that is a code, not drawing, right? Not 3,000 years. We expect every human being, I'm talking American culture because not all cultures do this. We expect our little 3rd graders, when they've had approximately 300 days of instruction, because a school year is 180 days. They don't do reading every single day, every single moment of that day. But by 3rd grade, they better be able to read, or what happens to them? They get held back or put in special ed, or that, you see, or they need a tutor because they're not going to get somewhere, you know. Buddy, if you don't buckle down, you see, now we got the shame going, right? Because we set the marker, 3rd grade. And by the way, 3rd grade is truly when learning to read becomes reading to learn. The general, you know, pool of people, if you had 100 people lined up and you took the 50 in the middle, 25 here and 25 there, took the 50 in the middle, most of them by the age of 3rd grade, right, 10 years or so, can read enough independently to pick up a book and teach and learn about something they want to. 3rd graders start bringing home books about dinosaurs, right? You know, and they're reading on their own, okay? So this is what happens. Brain has to function, mind has to function, and then education has to function. Or we don't get anywhere, right? Or we don't get to the powerful place, right? Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so now, can I do it? Okay, so let's think differently about reading. Go ahead. Give me a big smile when you're read to the bottom. Any of you going, OMD? What words jump off the screen to you? Yeah. Wind. Okay, but did the wind scream? No, but we want you to. Okay, what? It won't. Okay. Now let's go. Look at this word. How do we pronounce this word? Is it soldiers? No, we say soldiers, don't we? There's. I don't know if you noticed that there's no G in there, and that is spelled correctly, by the way. Okay. Do you see? And then you have to know what a swig is, right? Because you have to take a swig of wine, right? Which sounds a lot like wine, which you don't want to. Do you see? Now you think of all the things. Now, are there any words in this passage that you don't know? Okay, so it wasn't that you didn't know a word, right? But look at all that your brain had to do. It's all the decoding, all the vocabulary, all the syntax, all the pragmatics, all that, right? Plus, what did fluency and prosody have to do with it? Did you, in your brain, start and kind of pause and sound like somebody's, even make little voices sometimes and make different people say things so you understand it better? Simply amazing, right? Okay, let me see if I can do it twice in a row. Yes. We understand this? You got something in your mind? You kind of understand what it says? You got a picture?
That sounds better.
How does that change the meaning of what that meant to you? How does that change the picture?
Made it sadder.
We don't know what happened here, right? Could it have been, you know, a horrible accident of some kind, and you know, we're announcing to someone this died and then that one, you know, died, right? But this changes the whole thing, doesn't it? Same thing because of adding that last. So huge, just a few words. So that's why sometimes when we read and we miss a word. Anybody ever missed a quiz because you didn't see the word not? There you go. That's what I'm talking to you. Okay. See, I picked this one because I like, because you kept my second wind. No, because there is such a thing as getting a second wind. What's second wind? Yeah, or energy again, right? I'm really tired, I'm drinking a Coke, eating a cookie, I can go again, right? So the guy could be actually getting his second wind, couldn't he? But see, now you're looking, but see, that's culture, right? And that's context, right? If you had just this, it's a whole different picture in your head than when they put the graphics there, right? Do you see the, you guys are freaking amazing. Look at you, right? I love this one because if you have ever told someone who's a struggling reader or someone who doesn't like to read, you're gonna love this. You gotta read this book. This is gonna be the best one you ever had. You know, they are sick and tired of being told. By the time I got students in my class, sometimes the first question they ask me is, how many books are we going to have to read? I said, none. They're like, what? Is this reading class? Is this art appreciation or something? Am I in the wrong room? Is this anthropology? No, you're in the right room. And it's not math either, because I don't do numbers. I use all my brain cells for letters. Because reading is not fun for everybody. It is not. Reading is a tool. Here's my commentary, Dr. Betsy, hence why I don't teach kids, because I would get released from contract, which is a nice way of saying canned, fired, let go, goodbye, see you later, contract not renewed. Because I don't think that a child can be taught to read just on the premise of it's fun, because it's not fun. It's like exercise. For some people, exercise is actually fun. I don't know who those people are, but it is true, right? They're full at the gym, right? And these are the ones that are not at the gym on January 1st when they're starting their new thing. These are the ones that are in the gym every day. They're going, this is fun, okay? But there are also people who read because reading is a tool. I think if children were taught of reading as a tool first, right? Then they would fall in love with reading. Not necessarily because so they go read all the fiction books they can find, which that's cool too, because I've read some really cool ones. But so that they will read to find information, right? You know, that reading is fundamental. We lost the demental part. Now we just say reading is fun. And it's not always, right? Sometimes it's absolute torture. Try doing your tax forms. Oh my God. You know, it's terrible, right? You know, try using the directions to download some program, right? They'll hook up your Fire Stick and it won't hook up, and you try to find the it's not always fun, is it? It's a tool, all right? So, now let's look at some other ways that if you want to learn more about reading, here's some things that you can read. I'm not telling you they're fun, all right? They're not necessarily beach read, okay? This book, Jorge Dawson, which if we don't have this book in our librarians, we ought to. Jorge Dawson learned how to read at the age of 93. And for the vast majority of those 93 years, I would probably say at least 87 of them, he spent trying to hide the fact that he couldn't read. because he was shamed, because he couldn't read. But George Dawson, in his book here, states that he outlived and loved, until their death, 3 wives. He lost 3 wives, because sometimes if you live to 100, you outlive people. Okay? He loved and lost 3 different wives, raised, I think, 6 kids, right? And none of them ever knew that he couldn't read. It was his deepest, darkest secret, because he thought, I bet you can guess what he thought. If people knew I couldn't read, they would think, fill in the blank. I'm not as good as, I'm not as smart as, I'm not as dependable as, I can't get the job done, right? But I want you to know that, and here's the true irony. George Dawson owned a home, worked his whole entire life, is proud of the fact that he was never on any public service or assistance, and no offense to anybody that is, he was able to maintain an income that allowed him to do what he needed to do and take care of his family. And by the way, all of his kids did homework at the table with him and never knew that he couldn't read, because they'd say, well, Dad, what's it? And he'd say, who's in school? You read it, because he was smart. And then he'd say, okay, so what do you think the answer? Then he knew, because they had him read. You see, so he was creating better readers when he wasn't, right? Here's the serendipity about reading. A young man came up to his porch, knocked on the door. Well, he's 90-something years old. Takes him a few minutes to get to the door. By that time, the young man has already folded the flyer that he has and, kind of put it in the crack of the screen door and started to walk off the porch, right? The wind caught the flyer and went it across the yard. And George Dawson opens the screen door and says, hey, hey, hey. And I'm paraphrasing. What are you throwing trash in my yard? And the young man said, no, sir, not trash. He goes and gets the flyer and says, this is we're doing a literacy program down at the church down here, and we want people that can hardly read. And so we're passing out flyers so we can find people who can't read. There you go. So if that young man had stepped away, right, before George Dawson got to the door, guess what he would have done with the flyer?
He went the way to security.
Yeah. How about being a reading teacher? Come on over. Okay, so do you see what I mean? Instead of knocking on doors and talking to people, they said, well, just make a flyer. Okay, what a great idea. Okay, because people can't read, do share with everybody they can't read, so everybody could go, oh, here's a flyer for you. So serendipity. George Dawson actually joined the Literacy Project and learned to read basically before he died at 103. And one of the first things he told them is, they wanted to do letter sounds with him. He said, I'm 90 years old. I don't have time for letter sounds. Give me whole words. I need to read whole words. And I've got words I want to read, right? And so he told them, I want to know this word, because he was religious and he wanted to read the Bible. So he wanted to read some words. He goes, these are the words I want to know. And they showed him where they were in the book, and then he started reading. He wasn't a perfect reader, because he's starting late and everything. But so if you want to read a really good book about inspiration, this is the man. Part of the book is about reading, but part of it is about just his amazing life of how he did everything that he did too. Okay, here's another great read. Very easy read. I like John Medina's book when I say easy read, because you don't have to read every single word from the front cover to the back cover to understand what's going on. You can pick and choose and therefore use it as a resource. Not a fun night out. Let's go read the Brain Rules book. But to get the information that you want out of it, right? You can go in and find it. Though he is a big bioengineer, his language is very simple. His examples are very clean and cut. He mentions in the book both Judy DeLoach's dual representation theory. He does not mention DeHane's research on the development of the brain, like what the part of the brain that we use to read particularly, because it's not a book about reading per se, it's a book about learning. So if you want to be a better learner, and reading is part of that, then this is a great book to pick up, and we ought to have a copy of it in the library. There's my wish list. It's also online. I mean, you can look at the stuff online. He's got some great videos. Okay. This is the thing that trumps reading. This is why your father, my father, George Dawson and anybody else in the room that is a non or limited reader, illiterate or illiterate or anybody else, has gotten where they needed to go. Whether they didn't read because they were dyslexic, whether they didn't read because nobody taught them, they didn't have the chance to read, they were too busy, trying to live and stay alive. This is called human agency. It's a theory by Alfred Bandura's. He has a big old cognitive theory about how people learn, but this is one part of it. And his thing about human agency is that your brain, if it's working, and functioning and can learn, right, then sometimes when we have something that we don't know or we can't do, we use human agency to get the job done, okay? Personal agency means you do it for yourself, you get it done by yourself, right? You need your homework assignment done, you need your paperwork turned in, you go in there, you get it done. You've got human agency, personal agency. That thing teachers saying, you're responsible. Parents are saying, you're responsible, right? But if you can't get it done by yourself, some people are prideful, right? Stupid, I'm not doing it. And then they don't do it, right? Because they can't do it by themselves. Or they fail because they can't do it by themselves, and then we get into that whole shaming thing again, right? So sometimes we use proxy agency, right? Any of you ever ask help from somebody else? If you don't fix your own car, you do proxy agency every time it breaks, right? Okay? If you don't fix every meal that you eat, you use proxy agency, whether it's the person at the restaurant to bring you the food or whether it's somebody else to cook for you. You use somebody else to help you get fed, right? That's proxy agency. Even though you could maybe do it on your own, but also even if you can't do it on your own, you can still get the job done if you have proxy agency and you can find that significant other, all right? The third one is collective agency. That's what college and groups are all about. Because sometimes, if you're not powerful, right, the power is in the group. You use a group. My friend that I told you that could raise more money than anybody could imagine, she had some problems with independent agency. There were things, because of her limited reading and writing ability, that she could not do on her own. Trust me, you do not want to read her any minutes of any meeting, right, that she has read, that she has written, okay? And she can't read anything on her own either, okay? But she gets other people to do it by paying them, right? I'd like for you to send out this memo for me. I'd like for you to bounce this checkbook. I'd like for you to be my accountant. I want you to make sure, can you dial that number for me and get this person on the line? She gets it done by proxy agency. And we're not talking using other people, right? Like the manipulative kind of using. We're talking about being smart at it, okay? Collective agency. She can get a group of people stirred up in a heartbeat, and that's why she can raise more money than, I don't know who could raise that much money, right? Because she can break down the task. She'll come into a meeting and she'll say, okay, let's get going. Let me get my tablet, I need to take some. I can't think while I'm taking notes. Would you take some, who can take some notes for me? Who's got some good writing, okay? Can you type those up and send those out to everybody? Oh, great, perfect. Okay, who's it? And you would never know. She can't spell anything or write anything beyond her own name on a check. Because she's got all of these. So do you want to be a reader? Do I want you to be a reader? Yeah. I'm a reading teacher. But if you don't think you're a strong reader, or you're afraid you're not a good reader, or even if you are a good reader, these things will get you where you need to go, right? So human agency trumps reading, okay? And that doesn't mean the presidential kind and bad tweets. Okay, that means the kind that gets the job done, right? That's why in college, study groups, huge. Study partners, huge, right? Huge, okay, to make success happen. So and this is what I teach in my reading classes, that it's, you want to be the best reader that you can be, duh. Right? So you can be as independent, right? But if you can't, you can use proxy agency and collective agency. And if any of you are raising little bambinos or someday hope to raise little bambinos, you need to make sure you remember this, right? Because this is the way they're going to get the job done. In case you're end up raising a little non or limited reader or illiterate person who chooses not to read. Does that make sense? Stop the shaming. If you want a really good tearjerker, get a box of tissues, or you gentlemen get a cloth hanky, and then go on the internet and look up Children of the Code. Not Children of the Corn, that's another freaky thing, and it messes with my mind and my brain. Okay, Children of the Code. And the site Children of the Code shows little video clips of people who are non or limited readers relating experiences of how people felt and made them feel less than they are. And that's why on that other side, before I said third grade, I have a presentation called Third Grade, Best 3 or 33 Years of My Life, because people can get held back for twice and you can't get held back anymore. So, best 3 or 33 years of my life, because a lot of adults, if you're in adult ed, a lot of them are stuck at third grade. They come in and test on the tape and they're right at third or fourth grade. It's because they didn't build the rest of the skill. But even if they didn't, they can still do this, right? To help them get where they want, so they don't have to be worried about not having power, not having control, not having wealth, whatever they think wealth is. Because it's $1 million doesn't always get you anywhere, does it? Fancy car doesn't always get you anywhere, does it? It's the wealth of knowledge and self-control and power in yourself. So reading will get you there. But the very best reader who can't do this, they're not going to get there either, right? Okay, so let me see if I can do it again. I keep forgetting which is, oh, backwards. Okay, so let's take a reading test. Give a big smile when you're at the end. That's what I do with my students too, and it gives them read time, right? It gives them wait time, so I know kind of who's ready to go and who's not, right? I can get a sense without them saying, if you need more time, because then they don't want to say that, right? So they end up reading only half of it, and then they can't go on because they don't know the rest half of it. Okay, so how many of you read this and went, what the? And then all of a sudden you went, oh, wait a minute, what is this word? This. And then once you got the code, you were like, all right, I got this. And and my guess is that your brain didn't go, oh, every time I see a 7, it's really a T. So this is a T, and this is a T, and so that's the, and this is the. But you instantly learned a brand new code, right? Your little primitive thing wasn't walking toward the cougar, right? Your little dual representation thing was, I'm on it. 7 is T, 7 is T, 7 is T, T is 7. T is 7, right? Okay? And that last little thing, you got that too, right? What was the last thing? Uh-oh. Oh, now you're going to have to ask for the thing. Okay, so here's the bottom line. Here's the bottom line. And you've seen these things. I mean, a lot of people have seen these kinds of things before. Sometimes very well-meaning, oh, we're good. Oh, look how good I've done. Oh my God, that's so good. I'm a reading teacher with a Fitbit, big enough so I can see it. Okay. Sometimes very well-meaning people make flyers, right? Because the intention is good, right? To get the word out. But when I give trainings for reading teachers, or for teachers, content teachers, or anybody that works with the public at large, I say, here's what you have to remember. Do you know how you had to switch for a minute? At first you went, what? And then you got it? How many fonts are there on your computer?
Too many.
The proverbial pebbles in the creek, right? Grains of sand on the beach. So every time that a very well-meaning person says, I'm going to dress this flyer up and use New York hieroglyphics, right? Those people who struggle to read, you just ask them to add a whole nother code, and they struggle, right? Like you did that first line when you went, what the? Okay, and then you got it. They are still struggling. You're all the way down at the bottom, got it, and they're at loss somewhere up in here. Does that mean their brain doesn't work? No. Does that mean their mind doesn't work? No. Does that mean they don't have any power? No. Does that mean they don't have any wealth? No. Does that mean they don't have any control? No. Unless we, the society, says, you can't read this? I can't read it. Can you read it? Oh, you can read it too. Everybody that can read this, raise your hand. Oh. Do you see? You see? Because everybody that doesn't raise their hand is like, okay, I'm just going to say I do. I'm going to lie and hope she doesn't ask me a question, right? Because if she asks me a question, I'm in trouble. So you need to think about that, because you're going to, those of you who are in college as students, are in one of these days, you're already making things, right? You may be teachers or doctors or lawyers. Think of everything that a person has to read. Pamphlet from the doctor's office, directions on the back of a cereal box, you know, or a box to make something for dinner. Keep it simple. Keep it simple, right? Use a basic code. If you can, use the basic code. If the audience is wide, right? If the audience is wide, use the basic code. We don't need fancy. Not if we want a society of readers who feel confident that they can read just as well as anybody else, right? No body shaming, right? No culture shaming, no gender identity shaming, no self-identity shaming, no reading shaming. Let's be done with that. Who's here with me? Okay, let me try that again. Who's here with me? Yeah. Well, that was better. It was getting there. And see, that's why cultural change takes a little time, and it takes, and you know what else it takes? It takes you being the struggling one. Because sometimes you're all up with change if it's something that you can't do. But you got to remember there's more people in the world than you, right? Okay, so 2 minutes, questions? And there is a, ooh, let me see if I can get it, resource slide. So if you want the slideshow, I'll send it to you in PDF, okay? And you're welcome to use it and share it, but I'm gonna ask you to send a PDF. See my little name over there? Don't lose that, because then when you say, well, somebody told me I don't know who she was, now you know who she was, because I could need a job later. Okay, so questions for me? Ma'am, sir, okay, sir.
How many of your former students reach out to you and give you an update of where they are?
Well, not nearly as many as I would like to. And I'm going to tell you that the shame enters in that too, okay? Because somebody else say to them, the fear is somebody will say to me, oh, you took Dr. Betsy's class, you know her, she's a reading teacher. You took the reading class? Oh. There's a shame factor in being associated with me. It's like they don't look back at their special ed teachers either sometimes. Same thing. Same thing. They don't even want to be recognized by the special ed teacher, especially out in Publix, right? Shame factor. But when they do, I love it. I love it. And most of them do not contact me and say, I just finished Gone with the Wind. I just finished all the Harry Potter series because of you being in there. They'll tell me something like, I just passed my English class. Or I had to read an article for my ENC 1101 class, and I broke it down using the reading tools that you saw. He goes, and it still wasn't fun, but I got the job done. You had a question for me, sir?
If I wanted a copy, do I just meet up with you after?
Well, what I'd like for you to do is send me, I'll put out some business cards. I'd like for you to send me an email, because I'm an FSCJ employee. Oh, sorry, I didn't know I was. You can't read that? What? Oh, well, okay, just kidding. Okay, I'll give you a card, and then you send me an email and say, I was at the lecture, would you send me your PowerPoint? Yes, and I'll attach it. And please feel free to share it around, because if we're going to make cultural change, it takes more than me, and it takes more than us, right? Collective Proxy Agency, come on, let's do it. Let's make this happen. Yes, ma'am?
What motivated you to be a reading teacher?
Because my father couldn't read, and because I never realized he couldn't read until I got into my teen years. And I spent a lot of time with my dad. And he wasn't the nicest guy all the time, but I spent a lot of time with him because he needed somebody there, Proxy, okay, because he didn't have collective, and he didn't have personal. And so it took me a while to figure out. I remember the moment we were in the grocery store, and my dad had glasses, and I remember that he always used to keep them in his pocket. But the really strange thing is he had these glasses, and they had one of the side thingies broken, and he always kept them in his pocket broken. Because we would be somewhere, like at the grocery store, which back then we had to write a check. If you didn't have cash, you wrote a check at the grocery store. Somebody would probably go, a check, what's that? Okay, but he would say, they'd say, okay, because he was smart enough to know about how much money it was. He could keep track of math in his head and everything. And he'd say, oh, I got to write it to us. Oh, that'll be, $26. He goes, can I write you a check? Yeah, sure. He'd get out of the checkbook, and he'd go, oh, Dad, my glass. And they were mad, and they'd be, oh, and he'd say to the cashier when I was littler, and I didn't know how to write a check, would you just fill this out for me? You'll fill it out right, won't you? I can trust you. And they'd go, oh yeah, sir, I'll fill it. And they would fill it all out for him, right? Write out the dollar amount and everything, and then he would sign it, because the only thing he could do was sign his name. Well, as I got bigger, guess who got to fill out the checks?
You.
Yes, yeah, and I went, he does this every time. And then I started realizing that he couldn't read. So that's why I became interested in reading. And by the way, my first love was not to be a teacher. I kind of came in it backwards because somebody needed some help reading, and I said, well, I understand what it's like to be an adult who can't read. Not from personal, because I can read. I'm fortunate enough to read. But that's why. And then I said, oh, that's what his life was like. Shaming. I want anybody to know. Zip it. Zip it. Other questions? Okay, I will get some cards out of my bag. If you would like the PowerPoint, just go ahead and send me an email, and then I'll attach it and send it right out to you. I'll get those out today. All right? Other than that, if you need a reading class, I'm your person. Okay, and if I'm also going to teach an interesting 2-hour SLS course in the fall that instead of being focused, it's a special topics, instead of being focused on the regular SLS or IDS curriculum, the on-course or the study skills, how to be the best college student you can be, it's going to be focused strictly on reading. So you could watch for that in the system if you wanted to take a 2-hour reading class with me, just for, giggles. Or because you're ashamed you can't read well. You can do that too. All right? Thank you very much for coming.